Committee. So we've got Nicholas again and Sam joining us. So Sam, if you could just like introduce yourself and just tell us about how your experience with equity was.
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. So my name's Sam. I'm in my 5th year of an LLB going into my final semester. I did equity a year ago. Yeah, a year ago. I had Matthew Conneglan as my teacher, who was really good. And I did advanced trusts last semester, so I've had him for a while. And I really enjoyed the subject. Thought it was super interesting but like quite different from a lot of other subjects. It was good.
And Nicholas, how was your experience with equity as compared to real property?
Yeah, equity was one of my favorite maybe my favorite subject at uni. And I didn't expect it to be, because I, as I sort of mentioned before, I didn't have the best experience with IPCL, and I think I felt that I needed to turn it around. And then I had the most wonderful lecturer, Jeff Gordon, who, if you have Jeff Gordon this semester, then you're very blessed, because he's excellent.
Perfect. And okay, so how do you recommend approaching this unit? So in terms of study, in terms of prep methods for exams, what's your advice?
Do you want to lead off, Sam?
Yeah, I can say a quick few words. What's my advice? I would say that equity is something you have to, it's like quite conceptual, obviously. Like that's quite, it's one of its, and it's quite like its own kind of beast, quite distinct from, and it's quite nice when you do equity. I don't know if you found this, Nick, but there are so many references in like IPCL and real property. Just like, oh, you'll learn this when you do equity, you'll learn this when you do equity. And you're just like, oh, like, what is this thing? And then when you do it, you're like, oh, this is actually really kind of like, you can see these sort of pieces of the puzzle coming together. So in terms of studying it, I would try and like keep really structured notes. That was something that I kind of left till really last minute, which I wish I hadn't, which was kind of just like understand how the different parts of the subject relate to each other, like why, like how can breach of confidence feature in these different, like kind of understand the links and set it out well. That'd be my advice for sort of structuring notes. In terms of studying, read the cases. I think it's one where you really have to like read the cases to understand what they're talking about. Yeah, perhaps Nick has some more things to say on that.
Yeah, in preparation for this, I had a look back at my notes, and they were refreshingly slim. Like as Sam said, it is very conceptual. I think each case lends itself to being reduced to a quite cute principle in most cases, whereas other areas of law that we study get a little bit too finessed. I think one tip I gave to a friend the other day who's currently doing this, she was concerned that she was falling a little bit behind, even though it's the middle of week 1. I said, if you, for equity, I'd start at topic 4, to be honest. Topic 4 is the topic where you learn how an express trust comes into existence. And then topic 5 is how they operate. I think topic 6 is fiduciary. It's weird that gets sandwiched in there. I think you should do all of the trust topics first. If you're happy to sort of, if you're happy to say like, I'm kind of falling behind on the estoppel stuff and the breach of confidence stuff and the remedies in topics 2 and 3, I would say kind of park that if you want to, because that stuff's kind of all remedial at the end. You'll feel really out of sorts if you don't get your head around a trust really quickly. So my big suggestion for approach is to deal with all of the trust stuff. And then I think there are 5 out of the 10 topics are dedicated to trusts. And then you might feel a bit more comfortable that the more remedial stuff, like estoppel, the remedies in topic 3, tracing in topic 9, that those things make a bit more sense once the actual infrastructure of the course is there. I find it really weird that we do charitable trusts last when a charitable trust is really just a type of express trust. This also goes back to the thing that I said earlier in real property, which is that equity can be viewed nicely through the prism that equity intervenes in 3 situations. One where the parties want it to. Second is where the parties might not want it to, but the court says, well, you did things and we're going to infer that you did it. And then the third thing is we don't care what you wanted. We're the highest deliberative body in this country or this state, and we'll do what we want. And so conceptualizing your notes in that sort of tripartite structure might also give you a good way of approaching things.
So just jumping to our next question, did you experience any particular difficulties with this unit? So this could be in terms of a concept or the specific topic.
I did. I think, yeah. I think I would say that I did experience. When I was listening to what you were saying, Nick. It was interesting because I had one thing that I was kind of concerned about is that I was just looking at the structure of my notes now, and the two sort of subheadings that jumped out, the ones that confused me the most were remedial equity and fiduciary obligations, just because those two are kind of like, they feature in every kind of equitable situation that you might find yourself in. So I think it took me a while to get my head around like the fact that even though those were like distinct subtopics, they weren't actually like distinct, like in practice and in practice of answering questions. Like you always had some kind of fiduciary concept to deal with, or you always had some kind of like remedial, and also all the injunctions and like when you can do an injunction and what type, and like that kind of really did my head in. So I think remedial equity is what I was most concerned about as a subtopic heading into the exam. Yeah,
in terms of a topic that stood out to me as weird was tracing. When I got on top of it, I felt fine with it. But I think I just want to talk about tracing because it to me, it stands out as the topic that everyone sort of walks out of feeling a little bit bewildered. Tracing involves a little bit of more mathematical thinking than you often have to do in law school. For the maths geeks among us, that's really fun and cool. But it's also really weird to like render. So like tracing, just to give some more context, tracing is how you understand when money and property is moving everywhere and sometimes getting mixed amongst one another. It's like, how do you understand what proportions of the value gets to go to whoever it has to go to rectify everyone's situation. And that involves a little bit of mathematical thinking, which you may not have done for a while. So that's tricky. I think also to talk about Sam's point that some topics are more pervasive than you think about. There is a way I think that you can actually mind map the whole course from start to finish. It gets really convoluted and it breaks down the barriers of all the topics. So for example, the starting point might be to say, has a trust in any of its four forms come into existence? And then if not, then you kind of have the situation. The second step is the situational ones. So the existence of a fiduciary relationship or the existence of a confidential relationship. And then there's a big underline here where you say someone has breached one of those situations, and then you have to do all the remedies and the tracing together at the end. But even saying that, I once drew that out on a whiteboard and it was a horrible mess going across all the 10 topics at once. So yeah, be careful of that.
Okay, perfect. So talking more about the assessment structure in this particular unit, how did you guys approach those?
My big piece of advice would be to do the mid-sem. I don't know how your course is structured,
Yeah,
but
that's optional as well. Yeah.
Yeah, the optional mid-sem. But
Yeah.
it was so like, it's kind of weird because it was, I don't know whether it was early or whether we just took a while to do the topics, but the only topics that were assessed for us were topic 1, like the history and nature and applications of conscience being, I just saw the question, is it multiple choice? Oh, it's a mixture, I think. So it's a mixture of multiple choice and some short answer at the end. But there was no problem question. It was all just kind of like doctrinal, kind of like, what remedy can you get for breach of confidence, blah, 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 like explain this kind of like, and it was kind of obvious what the short answer was going to be, because you'd only done like 2 topics and there'd been like a few points that the lecturers had been like, oh, this is a bit unresolved. And then you like rocked up to the exam and it was like, oh, what do you think of this like unresolved point? So it was pretty straightforward, and it was nice to have that. It was only 20 marks. So it was kind of nice to have quite a straightforward thing done early, and then you could focus on the rest of the course. Having said that, it also meant that I got quite behind for the other topics, but that's all right.
Yeah, in my case, as I said before, when I said if you get behind on the first bit, then just go to topic 4, I advise that because that's exactly what happened to me. And I didn't do the mid-sem because I think I was getting stuck into evidence for some reason and decided to binge that for a few weeks and then let everything else slide. I mean, I'm all people who know me know that I advocate for 100% final exams. It's like it's my pet kind of thing that I advertise. I don't know why I'm so wedded to them, but if you have I know that people have lots of reservations about it because it's kind of like you have 2 hours and everything's riding on 2 hours. But if you don't get what I want to say is if you don't do the optional, I think you shouldn't be. I don't think people should be awfully afraid of 100% final exams. Like I think sometimes they get a little bit. They seem more spooky than they are. So I've just pulled up the law handbook for this semester, and I see that their assessment is just short answer questions of 250 to 300 words each. So maybe that's not up your alley, and you prefer to do a problem question, and you might want to do the 100% final.
I'd say for the short answers as well for the mid-sem to not take them too lightly, because I thought in my head, oh, it's short answers, not going to be that deep, but they actually want you to be deep in those short answers because they like rip you off and they take marks off you if you're too brief. But just that little point if anyone wants to go for the mid-sem. Yeah.
No, that's true. That's true.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I found out I sort of like was cruising through the exam. I was like, oh, this is such like a nice surprise. And then I was kind of rushing at the end. So yeah, I agree with that.
And compared to like your other units, how much time did you spend on this unit? Did you spend like more amounts of time dedicated to this to score better, or do you think it was pretty on par with others?
It's a good question. I wouldn't recommend how I ended up studying for this unit, which was just like listening to Matthew Coniglin for like 2 weeks straight at the end, because I had like I think equity was quite late in our exam block, so I had like a kind of clear run to it, and I'd left some topics that I hadn't done, but having said that, so in terms of time spent, I would say I probably spent slightly more time on this maybe than my average subject, but maybe just because I liked Matthew Coniglin and I liked the subject, so I was like kind of a bit incentivized too. Yeah, probably slightly more. But having said that, what was good about and one general tip I would give is like I'd really emphasize that like have well structured notes, like use your kind of subheadings. If you don't like understand how they all fit in, all these concepts like when you can get like an injunction, when you can do this, they can kind of get jumbled. And so that's why I did it via just like listening to Matthew's lecture slides, because he had like those subheadings set out, so I just copied that.
Yeah, at the risk of breaking into the other 2 subjects that we haven't been asked to talk about, though I think it's kind of important to realize that most people are probably doing equity, real property, evidence, and corps at the same time. I think equity I probably gave I gave corporations the least amount of my time, and that was a horrific mistake, and none of you should make that mistake. Do not underestimate corporations because it's gargantuan. And then I think beyond that, I just didn't really like corporations law, so I let it slide. And then it would have been real property, equity, and then I gave the most time to evidence, because evidence is also kind of thick. But I think equity can be a subject that you can kind of just do what Sam did, which is blitz through it in 10 days. The topics aren't they're not too long. They are nice and self-contained. It's just that there is that conceptual complexity which underlies it, that's sort of sitting beneath the surface. Yeah.
I was going to jump in and say, can I just like clarify, Sam, did you just study for 10 days before the final exam? Did I catch that?
No, I not just like solely that, maybe that's exaggerating, but I had done things before, but I had left a few topics that I just got behind on or whatever, because I had exams previously.
Yeah,
and then
no.
corpse and evidence like like quite soon, and then equity maybe a week or about a week after. And so I'd left a bit, and I just spent that week kind of just going listening to lectures.
Yeah, and one thing that stands out to me now is I remember we had corpse second to last, and then we had equity last. And in my corpse exam, there was one part of my corpse exam I didn't understand how it worked. And then the next day I just had equity left, and I studied constructive trusts. And the thing that I needed to answer the part of my corpse exam I didn't know how to unlock was a constructive trust. And when I got through those notes on the next day, I thought, oh my God, that's all that I actually just needed, that knowledge to get me through. And then now thinking back on it, I realized that, if you have an earlier knowledge in equity, then it will probably give you a bit more context for corpse, because corpse is almost just like equity and contract plus the Corporations Act. And then, of course, in topic 2 of real property, there's like the equitable exception to the Torrens system, which basically just says Control C all of equity and then Control V it all into this little space. So yeah, there is some advantage to getting into equity a bit sooner, so that it gives you the context for the other subjects that it intersects with. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll finish off with probably one last question on like, how did you collate notes for this unit? Like, what was your kind of approach to, did you combine lectures and tutorials? Did you make sure you did tutorial questions, or like, how did you approach kind of practical exam preparations?
Yeah, so equity is a funny one, and it's interesting. I've been asked to speak about it because there was the one subject I've done like something completely different from what I usually do for studying for subjects, which is usually I spend like most time just like reading the cases and then just like doing all of that, like mostly kind of self-directed. But for equity, and I think equity, one thing which is really good about equity is it's really well taught regardless of who you get. I feel like everyone I've spoken to has been like, oh, like this teacher is the best, and then you just speak to someone else who had a different teacher, and so like, and that was in
100%.
stark contrast to like, well, I don't want to.
Yeah, I found Jamie Glister's stuff really helpful. I didn't have him as a teacher. I had Derwent, and he was good for explaining content. But then Jamie was really good when it came to the exam problem question and answers. And
I found that as well. Yeah. No, and I had Matthew Conigal, and I really liked him, and he's the only subject I've done where I've kind of like thrown some of the cases aside and just like listened to his explanation of them. So yeah, in terms of studying for exams, I just listened to what he said, because he's such a like, like super articulate and super like economic with what he says. Like what he's saying will be like what you need to know. So I just listened to that, and then I switched to Jamie and some of the problem questions we got for the practical stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, funnily enough, I feel like I'm one of the only people in this law school that doesn't come away with this like glowing experience of Jamie Glister and Matthew Conigal, because I actually never engaged with any of their content, because I think Jamie was running the LLB when I was in the JD, and then I would have loved to have done advanced trust with Matthew Conigal, but then didn't get the chance because of my timetable. I think equity is reasonably straightforward. I think I relied actually on just sourcing a bunch of textbooks and seeing. I mean, this is my general study strategy is kind of opposite to Sam's. I don't read a lot of cases, and I find case extract books don't work for me. I love to just get a bunch of textbooks and then see what they have to say about it, which I guess is the same as what Sam's saying, is like maybe listen to a bunch of the lecture recordings and listen to what they have to say. Yeah, that just happens to be me. I'm not sure there's anything that's really too curveball-y about equity. Yeah, in that way. Should we? I see there are a few questions here.
Yep, I think we're just going to hand it over to Thomas to talk about public international law for a bit. But thank you, guys. That was very helpful.
No worries.
No worries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thomas, if you just want to jump in.
Just in general, or who was it? Sue, I think.
Sue, can you clarify if you mean public international law or private international law? Because public is a semester 1.
Public. Did you have anything specific about that you'd like to know, or just in general?
I think so. A lot of us JD1s, they do
General?
international
Okay.
law now in semester
Right.
2. Yeah.
Public international law is so different. Like I'm only in third year, but it's so different compared to almost everything that at least I've done so far. For a subject that's so abstract and conceptual, it's very structured. Like it's got a lot of principles that and doctrines that you need to follow. Although nothing's really concrete. It's not like a normal subject where you're not really disputing case law at all. Like you're just stating principles and stuff. But in public international law, there's a lot of ambiguity. So I recommend doing lots of outside reading, being really familiar with what's going on in the world right now. A lot of the problem questions tend to remodel contemporary problems. For example, oh, sorry, I'm just thinking if anyone had a question. There is. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, with our mid-sem, for example, there were a lot of issues that were relevant to the issues in Palestine earlier in the year in our problem regarding statehood and recognition of statehood. And there was also a lot of issues regarding title to territory, which is something that has been prominent in the case law, like with Chagos Island case, for example, that's been a really big case. So they tend to draw upon what's happening in the world in the problem. So it always helps to be aware of what's going on. And I guess kind of like criminal law, actually, it's got a heavy theory component to it. So you'll go through theories regarding what international law is. Is it really law? You'll go through ideas of soft law and hard law and how they interact with each other, what that means. And it's also got some connections with constitutional law, from what I understand, because there's one topic where you go through the relationship between international and domestic law. And then there are questions about whether the Constitution should be influenced by international law considerations or not. So generally, just to sum that up, do a lot of external outside reading, keep up with contemporary affairs. 2, don't get thrown off by the abstract kind of weird nature of some of the things you go through. And have scaffolds, have structured scaffolds, particularly for the topics state jurisdiction all the way to state responsibility. That will help you a lot. And yeah, that's generally my advice for public international law. If you have anything specific though, just pop it in the chat.